Hi, my name's Kim, and I've written a lot of books. That's some of them behind me. And most of my books are speculative fiction, so you might like to learn about writing speculative fiction from me. Maybe you're thinking, how am I even going to start this story? And then once I've started it, how am I going to finish it? Well, I'm going to be able to teach you that today. I'm going to teach you about the elements of storytelling and how to turn that into a plot. So let's jump straight in. Okay, to write a story, you need three things, and those three things are a character, a conflict, whoa, there it is there, and a context. Now I'm going to explain what each of these things mean, and at the end of it, you should be ready to start thinking about your story. Let's start with a character. Why do we need a character? Well, because stories aren't stories until they happen to someone. If you're just making up a story and it's not about anyone in particular, it's not going to have a lot of emotional impact. For example, let's imagine a really dramatic scenario. Let's imagine a scenario where there's a woman standing on a ledge outside a window 52 stories up above the traffic. And it's a really windy, wet night, and there's a helicopter that's lowering down one of those rope ladders to her. And every time she reaches for it, it just kind of escapes from her hands and she can't quite get it. And she really needs to get out of the building because right behind her there are werewolves. A pack of werewolves behind her, snapping at her heels. She needs to exit the building immediately. And she needs to do it without falling 52 stories into traffic, though, to be fair, if she fell 52 stories, the traffic really wouldn't make much of a difference. So that is a really dramatic scenario. There's no doubt about it. And as a reader, you might read that and think, oh yeah, I'm really interested to know what might happen, which is great. But what we want to do with our stories is we want to make them far more dramatic than that. And we do that by making people care about the characters. So if I told you that exact same scenario, but it wasn't just any random woman trying to escape the werewolves, it was your mum or your sister or your girlfriend or your bestie, then all of a sudden your interest in that story, it peaks. You start to become really, really invested in the outcome. So stories aren't stories until they're about somebody. And what you've got to do is figure out who that person is and give us some aspects of their personality that we can connect with. So things to look out for are giving them a personal history. Where have they come from? Why do they do the things that they do? Give them flaws. When people are flawed, we like them better. Though maybe not cannibalism, that's probably a flaw too far. Make them relatable. How do you make people relatable? You make them like us, have the same interests or the same neuroses, the same worries as you do. And then people who are like you will read it and go, oh, I totally know that feeling. That's how you make a character fascinating to a reader. And once a character is fascinating to a reader, then you can start doing awful things to them and the reader will be really interested in your story. One last thing about character before I move on. Because what you've got to write is a speculative fiction story, you can actually use a speculative fiction character if you like. So what I would suggest is something like perhaps you want to write about a mythological creature. Of course, werewolves and vampires have been done to death. That doesn't stop other people writing about them, though. You might want to go and have a look at some books about mythology and find something new and different that no one's ever done before. I mean, wow, imagine writing a story about a baby basilisk chick that's looking for its mother and accidentally turns people to stone all the way. What you want to do is you want to go and find a mythological creature or a fantastic creature or make up your own, and maybe they can be the lead character of the story. Maybe we can put them somewhere else in the story. We'll talk about that in a second. Because once you have a character, even if you have the best character plan ever and you know exactly what they're about and all about their backstory and everything that they hope and fear in life and how they behave in any circumstance, and they're really fascinating, until they have a problem, this isn't a story. So you need to give your character some conflict. You need to add some conflict to your story. Now, conflict means that you give a person a problem, basically. What do people do when you give them a problem? Well, they do one of two things. They either try to solve the problem or they ignore the problem. If they ignore the problem can sometimes get worse. Admittedly, the problem can sometimes also just go away, but that's not a story. It's not a story if you have a character go, oh, I think I hear a noise in the creepy old cellar, and then they just ignore it, and the next time they go down there, they go, no, that noise is definitely gone. That's not a story. But if they hear a noise in the creepy cellar, conflict, and they try to do something about it, like go look for what's making the noise in the creepy cellar, then we've got the first step in our plot. And if they avoid the problem, I really don't want to know what's in the creepy cellar, what we do is we make the problem come back harder. So the next time we hear the noise, it's not in the creepy cellar, it's in their bedroom. Okay, so the important thing to remember about conflict is it creates our plot. So remember I said at the start I was going to tell you about how to devise a story and turn it into a plot? The conflict provides your plot, okay? So you give your character a problem, the character tries to solve the problem, or they try to avoid the problem. Either way, they've taken a step, and whatever happens next relates to that step. So either they try to solve the problem and get themselves into a worse problem. I went into the creepy cellar and all of a sudden I was trapped by ghosts. Or they avoid the problem and it comes back worse for them. Then they have to try and solve the new problem that they're in. So the ghost comes and visits them in their bedroom. So now they have to go and find a Catholic priest to perform an exorcism. I don't know, I'm not Catholic. But the important thing to remember is that in a story, it's really just a character trying to solve a conflict in a series of events that should have kind of a sense of rising tension. Now, you have to write a really short story, so you only need a couple of steps. And it doesn't matter how it ends. Your character can solve the problem or they can die horribly underneath the stairs in the cellar. It really doesn't matter either way. Well, it probably matters to the character, but they're not real, so it's okay. So just think of a few steps that your character can take to try and solve their conflict, and hey presto, you've got a plot. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, but I don't want to write just an 800-word speculative fiction story for school, I want to write a whole novel. Well, it's simple. You just keep complicating things and giving the character more problems, introducing other characters, giving them problems too, putting it all together in order, and hey presto, you have a novel. Okay, it is a little harder than that, but I've done it quite a few times now, and you get used to it. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about then, did I say this? Your conflict can have a speculative fiction element. So it can be ghosts, vampires, werewolves, monsters, frost giants, trolls, ogres, ants, any kind of thing in the world as long as it's not in copyright. Okay, so no hobbits, they're not okay. Tolkien made them up. But Thor, totally, you can use him. Marvel stolen, you steal him back. The final thing we want to talk about then is the context. And by this I mean the setting, but I mean more than just the setting. I mean the way that the setting impacts on the character and the conflict. So, for example, rather than just saying this story takes place in a magical fantasy world where there are dragons, you need to start thinking about what those dragons mean. Do the characters ride them? Do they fight with them? Do they get advice from them? Is the magical world full of giant trees that the dragons eat because they're vegetarian? Or do the dragons have to eat the blood of giants? Just think about more than just the setting as being a backdrop. Think about the way that it impacts on the conflict and the characters. I'm going to give you a little example using stationery. So here's a story. This is Mr. Highlighter, and this is Mrs. Highlighter. They are ordinary people, just like your mum and dad say, and they live in Brisbane in 2017, in the here and now, and they are having an ordinary kind of a conflict. Here we go. Why haven't you taken the bin out? Why should I take the bin out? Because you're a man and it's a man's job. I thought you were a feminist. So you can see they're just having a conflict. And, if we wanted to turn that into a story, we could. It'd be pretty boring, but we could. Now imagine that we take these characters out of the here and now, and we put them in a different place and time. Let's put them in an English manor house in the 19th century, and they are now Lord Penn and Lady Penn, and they are having the same conflict. Darling, why didn't you take the garbage out? Oh, there's something wrong immediately. This doesn't even sound right. The way that they talk is going to be different. Lord Penn, why haven't you removed the rubbish? Or even different again, because probably Lord Penn's not moving the rubbish. Lord Penn, why have you not instructed our butler Jeeves to remove the rubbish? There's something still wrong though. Do you know what it is? In the 19th century, women and men were not anywhere near equal. For large parts of the 19th century, women couldn't even own property. It would actually look more like this. Lord Penn, what is it, woman? Nothing. So you see, the context changes everything. So the character gives us the ups and downs of the story. It gives us the vertical movement so that we feel things. The conflict gives us the horizontal movement of the story. It takes us from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Those changes drive the character, and the character drives the conflict. And coming in around all of it is the context, which surrounds it and integrates with it. And once you have conflict, character, context, these three amazing cards, you have a story and you can start writing. Good luck.